Hello and welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so super excited to have you joining us yet again today for another fabulous guest, another incredible person that I'm so privileged and pleased to have on the show today. And it's the wonderful Katherine Bartolo. Hello, Katherine.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks so much for having me.
It's so wonderful. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show. And for those of you that aren't aware of Katherine, she's had a long and distinguished career in the area of property valuation. Now, as Valuer General of the South Australian Government at the moment, she's again in a very senior role, but she has had a very distinguished career working on as a non-executive director and in many different roles supporting the property industry. But before I say too much about that, Katherine, how does one become involved in property valuation? What is property valuation? Do you want to share some of your background for people?
Yeah, it's a frequent question, actually. I, like so many people, just fell into it, actually. So I always loved property, but I was a bit of a frustrated architect. I wanted to be an architect. I used to draw floor plans as a child. My mother insists that that's an odd thing for a child to do, but I loved it. It was fine. And when it came time, I left school, I had to start full-time work because I needed to be financially independent immediately. And so I started work more or less the day after I finished school. And because I always liked property, I didn't really know what area I would go into. So I was in administration, and through a different variety of property roles, I went to a property valuation firm. And I really liked it, and it really ticked all of the things that suit me. So it has a certain level of analytics, like hardcore analytics that you need to be able to do. But particularly in a residential sense, there's a certain interpretation of emotive influences as well. So it sort of appeals to both sides of my brain, that analytical side and that creative side, to be able to analyze both influences. And so I decided that I would go and become qualified as a property valuer. And that was an interesting exercise. I did my undergraduate course whilst I was working. And at the same time, I was being elevated through different roles in the firm that I was working in, and decided to do my postgraduate, which is effectively a master's degree in some respects. And it was a really good exercise to do because I'm now a fellow of our professional body, the Australian Property Institute. And I've had a really enjoyable career being able to explore all those sides of my brain, effectively, creativity and analytical sides as well.
Wonderful. What an interesting story. Needing to leave school and find some work, and it's interesting how life at that age does tend to shape or determine many of the career paths that people go down. And I really hear how it's satisfied that the analytical of all of the data around property, but also the feeling side and the creativity around if it's people's homes and that residential X factor, if you like, around it.
Yeah, definitely.
With such an interesting career and doing valuations, which is something that is very much it's almost a part of the Australian DNA. Everybody's so into property and watches the property prices going up or down or on television all the time.
Yeah.
But for you as a person and going through the data and the intuition, etc., for many years now, I'd be interested to hear, what does success then mean to you?
It's a really interesting thing. When you're younger, in your 20s, you're not entirely sure. I found, anyway, personal experience. And I think you fall into a really easy trap of trying to measure what your success should look like by virtue of other people's. And it's a really easy thing to do. That person has this, or goes there and gets to do these things, etc., and you aspire to that sort of success as you perceive it at that particular point in time in your life. I think as I got a little bit older, to me, it really became apparent that success to me is being comfortable. So I'm comfortable in my role, and that sounds really, actually, now that I think about it, sounds quite lazy. It's not really. When I say comfortable, it means that I don't have any kind of negative influences or challenges that I would not choose to otherwise have. So that's my definition of comfortable. So I like to be challenged. I like to try new things, learn new things. But the whole point of it is that I'm in a position where I am comfortable to be able to do so. So I have not invited or perpetuated any kind of unnecessary stresses in my life, so that I'm able to enjoy these new challenges, learn new things, and really be able to expand and continue to grow. I think that's, for me, what that is. I think it's also a certain level of you control your own destiny. I think that's a certain measure of success to me as well. I don't quite like the idea that you just sort of float in and around. If you want to achieve a certain thing, it's within your power to do so. And I think that's where I measure my success, is that I've been able to bring myself to the position where I'm comfortable to be able to do all those different variety of things and really enjoy them along the way as well.
What wonderful and interesting insights. You know, I've not quite heard comfortable as somebody's definition of success.
It sounds particularly lazy. I hope I clarified that it's not just not being challenged. I think that's really important, but it's the ability to be able to be, I think.
And I hear you, because understandably, when people are younger and less established in their career and financially, the challenges there may be more around establishing yourself in your career and financially. And as people get older, it actually makes sense. I just hadn't heard the word comfortable used before, but it makes sense, because you reach that level of career in your career, and you reach that level financially, and with kind of the bases being covered, to then be able to put yourself in those challenging positions to learn new things. And it's, I think, a really wonderful way of looking at and defining success, in that you're still looking for those challenges, but you're not creating undue stress or undue this or undue that. Because it's such a different way of looking at it, I think that this is a really wonderful time to learn ask you. So what sort of things or suggestions or tips do you have for how other people can create that in their lives?
I heard a lady speak some years ago. It'd be 6 or 7 years ago, and she spoke, and I'm really embarrassed that I can't remember her name, but she was a wonderful woman, and she talked about having these hardwired goals and soft-wired means of getting there. It was Gail Kelly, who used to be CEO at Westpac, and I found that really interesting. And so my partner and I, we sat down and discussed what our hardwired goals are for our life, and we measure our success about what is important for our life. And I don't believe that you can separate life and professional success. I think they all go together. And so we sat down, we hardwired what that looks like for us, what we want to achieve in our lifetime, and when we would like to be able to achieve it. How we go about getting there, we need to remain quite fluid, because there's external influences and disruptors, as we have firsthand experience, all of us, in the last 2.5 years. You have things that are thrown at you that you can't necessarily control, and so you need to be able to adapt and pivot around those. But the end game remains the same for us. So how we go about achieving it needs to be fluid, but what the end game is fixed in stone. And
do you mind sharing perhaps one example of something that was a hardwired goal for you? What's a good example of that?
Yeah, so the private life hardwired goal is that at a certain age, which is some way in the future, but at a certain age, we are not going to do 9 to 5 anymore. And so that is a hardwired goal in our life, and how we're going to go about achieving that tends to shape and move about, but that's what we want to achieve by that certain age. And that's because we love the flexibility that goes with that, and we want to be able to try new things and be able to do different things. And there's a lot of foundational work that we need to do to be able to support that. So financially, for example, is one thing. So we're putting all the steps in place so that we can achieve that particular goal. And that's really exciting, because then at that particular point in time, we get to reap the benefits of it, which is, a really good thing to be able to achieve.
And thank you for sharing that example. And I think that it's a very relatable example as well, where people are talking about, and the word I heard there was flexibility. It's about that flexibility around the 9 to 5 work and the 9 to 5 life, if you like, that by a certain age, having more flexibility about what that might look like. And I think it's a great example of a hardwired goal, but you were talking about the soft-wired, adaptability and ways to get there, because there are many different ways, and technology will obviously impact on that as well.
Absolutely.
And these hardwired goals and soft-wired ways of getting there, there are obviously things that you do you reflect on them often? Do you come and look at it every month, every quarter, every year?
I don't think we're that structured at home. Professionally, yes. So professionally, I like to check in every month or so, and just have a look at what those core goals are that I have, and make sure that the choices and decisions that I'm making along the way are in aid of those goals. And it might not be readily apparent. The first review or the first choice may not be readily apparent how it ties in or links to that hardwired goal. But as long as it's on the pathway there, then you know that you're kind of on the right track, and that it will ultimately get there in the end. And I think trial and experience means that you get a bit more confidence that you are actually making the right choices along the way. And it's about recognizing that what you are doing is for a purpose. And I think purpose is the ultimate thing that you need to understand about yourself, is what is your purpose. And if you understand that and where your goals are, it makes it much easier to make choices and decisions in aid of them.
And you raised a really good point there about the trialing things and seeing what works, and obviously on that soft wiring. I really like that soft wiring of trialing and experiencing different things and learning from it, and trusting those decisions. I'm interested as well then in those times where you might do something, invest some money or invest some time, and when you look back, you then go, oh, actually, no, this was taking me away from that major hardwired goal. It was a good experience to go down that path, but it's taking me away, so I need to kind of reset. What sort of things do you do in terms of your self-talk at that time? Because sometimes people could maybe be a little bit judgmental or negative about the time and the money
Yes.
going down that pathway. What sort of things would you say to yourself to turn it back into a learning experience or a part of that journey?
I think it is recognizing that even negative or what perceives to be negative outcomes are a learning experience. You do learn from them, and that will ultimately then move you closer towards a positive or the goal that you're working towards. So one thing I can think of is, obviously, as part of our life plan ambition, is there's a certain level of financial security that I would like to have before I'm ready to step away from that. And I decided that I would try to diversify my investments. And I did that just after COVID commenced thinking that the stock market was quite depressed. And I thought, if ever I'm going to do it, it would be now, because if it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I feel quite comfortable that it will reverse in time. And so I invested a little bit of money. I didn't go mad or anything. I invested a little bit of money into the stock market, and I hated every single second of it. And it turned out to be profitable in the end, and that's okay, and it's fine. I've sold out. But I just found that the fluctuation of it, I found myself checking it all the time. It was distracting me from other things that I could otherwise be doing that is more in my skill set and arena. And so I stepped away from it in the end and decided to refocus myself on the area that I understand, which is property, and understanding the trends of that market, and devoted myself to investment there. So I didn't have a loss, and I suppose that makes it easier to not be so self-incriminating. But at the same time, I was like, do you know what? You gave it a go. You learned that it's not for you, and it is now. Focus all your energies on what you do know, which is property.
And I think that that's a really, thank you for sharing that personal example, because I think that that's a really great example again of, that hardwired goal of the financial security, and then taking that, leaning into it is one of the wonderful expressions I like to use. Yeah. Leaning into, stock market, this is the time I'm going to do it. And then doing it and not losing money and making a little bit of money with it, but seeing that the disruption on your thoughts and your behaviours and your this and your that cost benefit, coming back to evaluation, valuation language, the cost benefit in other areas was perhaps too high, and you could use your skill set in the valuation side to actually make different decisions. I think it's a fabulous, thank you so much for sharing, because it's a fabulous example where, people that may be tempted by crypto or this or that, there's always going to be another shining new thing. And there's nothing negative or bad with it, but just to again be aware, it's not just the financial return or not, it's also what else is happening in your life.
I'm terrified of crypto. I don't know. I'm one of those people that sort of went, this internet business won't catch on, and this crypto business won't catch on. I've been proven wrong, obviously, but to me, there's just too much uncertainty, and it just seems I don't understand the mechanics of it, and because I don't understand the mechanics of it, it's on my risk register of no. That's a no, and that's fine. Not everybody needs to. So there's plenty of people who are going to participate in that, and that's okay.
And that's where I don't want to come across sounding like, no, don't do crypto, but just being aware of the impact, not just the financials, but you described so beautifully with your stock market, the impact on the other areas for you. And I think that whether it's crypto or property investing or stock market investing, whatever it might be that you're looking at or engaging in as one of those soft wires to make your goals. What else do you think is really important for people when they are perhaps looking at somebody like yourself that's, been so super successful in a career and in many different ways? What sort of suggestions would you make for how other people can create that in their lives?
Oh gosh, I think I've been very fortunate throughout my career. Many years ago, I was working with a personal trainer, and a personal trainer will tell you that they do physical personal training 10%, and 90% of it is mental and emotional coaching, I think. And it was really interesting. So he and I used to have wonderful, deep theological, philosophical discussions. But it was just a really interesting time in my life. And he was a very big part of my life at that time. We became good friends. And I learned a lot in that time about myself. So, and the reason why I think that's really important is understanding yourself as best as you possibly can. And it is an ongoing, lifelong journey. You're not ever going to achieve full understanding, I think, because you always are constantly changing. So understanding yourself, though, means that you aren't going to project onto other people if you're feeling a certain way, because you recognize certain stimulus and how it's affecting you. And it means that you can keep your mind comfortable or in a state of peace, so that you are not erratic or inconsistent, which I find is really detrimental to your own and others' well-being. It's to try and have an awareness just to be able to recognize where you can and can't push yourself as well, which I think is really important. So that was a really important part of my particular journey, and I would probably say the most important at that particular point in time. But since then, it's just about having really good people in your life and around you, and there's always something to be learned. So surrounding yourself by people who are going to compliment you or celebrate you or promote you, or just be there when you need to have a sob, because sometimes you do. All of those things, I just think having a really good network around you is really critical to being able to do the best that you can possibly do. And when you've got people that are relying on you, you need to be at your best all the time. And so you need somebody to help you so that you can help them. And I think that's a really important part of what is necessary for me. Anyway, everybody has their own individual needs and what helps them and guides them and promotes their best. And it's just recognizing what it is that you need for yourself. And that goes back to that self-awareness I was talking about at the beginning. As much as you can, understand what does push and motivate you and where your energy levels sit. And I mean, I know that if I do 3 or 4 days of workshops or webinars or speaking events in a row, you're going to need to put me in my cave for 2 days after that. I'm going to need some cave time away. So I know that that's where my energy levels are structured, so I can manage that. And that means that I'm not burnt out and I'm still available and able to show up and support the people that I'm responsible for. And I think that's really important to me anyway.
Wonderful. There's so many so many different suggestions there. So thank you so much, Katherine. Everything from that wonderful story around the personal trainer and the self-awareness and developing that greater level of self-awareness, through to once you're more aware of yourself, then surrounding yourself with the cheerleaders and the people that are going to support you and lift you up. And that final part around constantly learning, and there's always something new to learn. And I even hear when you were describing how you're aware with yourself that when you go to a conference or you're around a lot of people and it's quite busy and you're talking and chatting a lot for, say, a few days, that you then need to go back to the cave and kind of recharge. Yeah. That level of awareness is really important, I think, for how people can manage their energy levels, manage their performance so that they are giving their best and being their best when they're around others and for themselves. And I think, you know, with the things that have happened with COVID and with life and with financial stresses and all of that, understanding that in a similar way, you know, being around technology and then taking time out from technology, yes, all of those different things are important as well, because in that self-awareness that you so beautifully describe, that journey then helps you to keep growing and keep being more comfortable and more resilient as things happen in your life.
Yeah, there's been obviously it's a very difficult time in the world for a lot of people, and there's some really awful things happening. And I found for a little while I was listening to various podcasts, or I don't really subscribe to the news. I find it sensationalized, I find, so I don't particularly enjoy it. There's a certain level I obviously do for my work because it's important, but I do try to isolate myself a lot, but I found I was getting really agitated by certain narratives, and so I just tried to shift that a little bit. So I'm currently in I'm listening to comedians be funny mode at the moment. So as to just balance out do you know what? I don't need to be driving on the way into work getting agitated because of these horrible stories. So I've just shifted now to the comedy streams for a while, and I'll stick with that for a bit. So I know that it was triggering me to get angry. I was getting angry about stuff. So
I think this is why cats and dogs and things are so popular on Facebook, because people are, looking for that escape from the negative media and the negative news all the time. And that's it's funny you say comedians, because that's how I sorry, my phone keeps making a noise. That's how I came across Michael McIntyre. So I binge watched Michael McIntyre and Dylan Brown, and I've binge watched all of these amazing comedians for exactly that reason, because in Australia, as you know, we had bushfires and all sorts of things happening long before the COVID years. So the sustained difficulties and challenges from natural environmental activities has meant that one of the things I became self-aware around was that this was too much distress listening to this all the time. So stop listening to it, try and find what you can in terms of the facts and the information, and not the sensationalism.
Yes.
Because obviously you still need to be able to live and work and understand what's happening with different things, but to step back and I love that self-awareness that you keep describing and sharing again about you were driving and you realized you were getting too agitated from what you were hearing, and so you changed it to comedians.
Well, I think it's important just to have a little bit of balance, and I too love Michael McIntyre. I think he's great, and we've bought tickets for when he comes to Adelaide next year, so I'm really excited to go and see him. I think I bought the day they came out. But he's a wonderful circuit breaker, and I just really enjoy that he doesn't have to, and again, this is a personal preference, he doesn't necessarily have to be crass. He's just funny, and I just really enjoy it. It's almost like an innocent humor in a way.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I love him as well is exactly that's his storytelling about walking out the house in the morning with children, all the everyday, going to the dentist, getting out of bed, all the everyday stuff that he talks about. He does it in such a funny and beautiful way. But he's a great example of you can be very funny without being crass and this and that, which again is my personal preference as well. But Katherine, I think we could talk about Michael McIntyre and the rolling hills of Kangaroo Island behind you for hours. But if people wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way to contact you?
Oh, through LinkedIn would be the best way. Professionally, it's a really good way of how I disseminate information about what I do anyway. But it's also a really good means to connect, and I'm pretty easy to find. So if you just Google it, will take you there, and you'll be able to find me. So I do have a web page, obviously, for my professional role as Valuer General, which is a good way for people to understand what it is that I do and how I go about doing it, because it is an essential and necessary thing to do, but it can often be misunderstood. So going to those sources of information is a great way to self-educate.
Fabulous. And yeah, if people want to understand more about property and valuation, thank you, Katherine. That's also something that they can reach out to understand more and educate themselves.
Yeah.
But my favourite question is, what advice might you give to your younger self?
So I was thinking about this earlier, and I think if you're going to give advice to yourself, I think it suggests that you have a regret about something that you should have or should not have done. I might be over analyzing. I'm pretty sure I am, Michelle. But it did occur to me that I'm not a big fan, for one, of regrets. You go through good and bad things your whole life, but there's something to be taken from all of them. So I think if I was really pushed to it, I'd probably just go, do you know what? It'll be okay. Hold on, it'll be all right. Just enjoy it maybe a little bit more. I think probably I put a bit too much pressure on myself when I was younger to be responsible, where nobody had asked me to. I had assumed that role. And probably just to tell myself just to chill out a bit and don't worry about that. That'll be okay as well. But yeah, just enjoy it. It's going to be a bit of a ride, but it'll be okay. And have fun with it.
How wonderful. It will be okay, have fun with it and enjoy it. And I hear the qualification in there around, well, you know, it's created this life that you have now. So there isn't necessarily any regrets, especially if you have such a feeling of comfort and being comfortable where you are at this stage. So, Katherine, thank you so terribly much for coming on the show today. It's been a real pleasure having you. And to all of the viewers out there, I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have, hearing and seeing yet another incredible expert in a very different field, again in property valuation, sharing with us how they have created this wonderful success in their life and the sort of things that they've done with their mindset for success. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.